South Park is known for being an equal opportunity critic, and their rebukes are always as accurate as they are crude. When I was growing up as a Mormon kid, I had friends and acquaintances who would reference the All About the Mormons episode from South Park pretty consistently. I actually had one guy who would occasionally follow me around and just say, dum 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 da dum dum dum. I posted a reaction to that South Park episode about a year ago, and one of the most common comments was asking me to react to the Scientology South Park episode. That was a common question, and then obviously the Book of Mormon musical reaction, which I am working on, but today we're talking Scientology. I will say, South Park aside, Mormonism often gets compared to Scientology. I think specifically between the two founders, between L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, and Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon Church. I think too, whenever I make videos about Mormon temple ceremonies and how there's kind of a leveling up process, even between the endowment ceremony and the second anointing, people often bring up Scientology because there's also a similar and even much more specific leveling up process within Scientology. And I'll say, before I researched for this video, I really didn't know that much about Scientology other than that Tom Cruise was a Scientologist, and I've heard things over the years, but this is my very first deep dive into this subject. So I feel like I'm basically going into this blind, and even when I just simply Googled Scientology, I was surprised to see they have a cross as, you know, on the front of their building as part of their logo or their insignia, and I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have thought, I'm like, is Scientology a religion? Is it a cult? Is it therapy? Is it an organization? Is it a business? Some say probably the answer is yes to all of those things, and I think in the South Park episode they definitely touch on that aspect, that it's pretty unclear what Scientology even is to outsiders like me. But if there's one thing I know about South Park based on the Mormonism episode and some of the other things I've seen from them, they seem to usually know their stuff when they are criticizing something. So I'm excited to learn about a religion via South Park. Before we continue, just a quick reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel, drop a comment if you have opinions about the South Park Scientology episode. I know South Park was also recently in the news for their episode about Donald Trump, so I did make a separate Patreon reaction video reacting to the somewhat infamous Donald Trump South Park episode. So if you want to see that, that's already posted on Patreon if you want to keep the party going after you finish this video. The entire Scientology episode is available for free online, so I'll drop a link below in case you want to watch that after. So we start off with the friends having a conversation, and Stan basically says he doesn't want to spend any money, so let's jump in at the beginning.
No, I don't want to spend any money, you guys. Let's just do something fun that's free. Stan, don't you know the first law of physics? Anything that's fun costs at least $8. Yeah, see ya!
Hello, would you like to take a personality test? It's fun and it's free.
So I do think this is hilarious how they show the Scientology missionaries. There's two of them, which also feels reminiscent of Mormonism, though they are different genders, which would not be allowed in the church. Name tags, dressed nicely in business casual, or just business, I don't know. And then just vagary. So we have Are You Happy? And a free personality test. And then they have their little Dianetics book off to the side. Let's see what the pitch is.
We're doing free personality test today.
What do I have to do?
Have you heard of Scientology? It's all based on the book Dianetics. A lot of really cool people are Scientologists, like Tom Cruise and John Travolta.
And this, I think, also highlights what I said earlier about, like, Scientology has always had the most confusing branding to me, which almost feels very purpose-driven because they don't really want you to know what you're getting into. Even the word Scientology sounds like, it doesn't sound like Christianity. It has science-ish in the name, so is it a secular thing? I've actually seen, personally, I've seen the Scientologists posted up in certain places before, especially when I lived in New York, and it was always this same level of just almost like inaccessibility. I think it's very interesting that they pitch this free personality test and that it's very vague, so that you don't really know what it even is. It seems fairly manipulative to me. I also think using celebrities to get people through the door is a really seems to be a common approach to me. It's basically like, celebrities can't be wrong. Tom Cruise is a movie star. He can't be wrong about anything. And so, did you know he's a member of our church? And I mean, she didn't even say church, but they're members of Scientology. And I feel like using these public figures as missionaries and as PR, I feel like that feels very relatable from my experience as well.
Brian's gonna give you your personality test and then let you know some things about Scientology.
Look, is this a religion? Because my family is like Catholic or something.
Scientology is more of an alternative to psychology than a religion.
Then how come that sign says Church of Scientology?
What's the Denver Broncos record now? 6-2?
And then he tries to distract him, obviously. What's the Broncos record again? I like that they highlight the same question I have, which is like, what even is Scientology? It exists almost in this new age religion world that I've only ever associated with LA and Hollywood. Also just the friendliness. She also mentions at another part, like, look at all the people taking the tests today. And it almost gives you the sense that the gravity of the situation is just propelling him forward rather than he is propelling himself forward. And this reminds me of on my Mormon mission, we used to be taught that we should invite people to get baptized the very first time we teach them. We were also supposed to just kind of like make up a baptismal date. So it would be like, I would just like be peeking at my calendar off to the side and be like, okay, 3 Sundays from now is blah, blah, blah. And we'd be like, we're holding a baptismal service. Would you like to come to the one we're already holding, even though it would be their own baptism? These people who are very cheery, very happy, moving you through these different checkpoints. It's, I think, especially for the vulnerable or people who are at a point in their life where they're very open to suggestion, it is definitely playing on people's weaknesses, in my opinion. He goes into the room and then we're going to see them start the test.
All right, now I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Just answer these questions as truthfully as you can, all right? Okay. Number 1, do you ever make remarks which you later regret?
Sure.
So he just starts asking him all these random questions. One of them was, do you ever whistle just for the fun of it? And I've heard of these personality tests before. I've seen them, like I said, I've seen people trying to get you to, hey, come take a personality test. I decided to go see if I could take the test online because I was assuming you could. Here's the one I took. I'll link it below if you have curiosity to see what the Scientology test is. I did think it was hilarious because I put maybe for every single answer. And it still gave me a graph that is basically looks like they're trying to tell me something that's legitimate about myself, even though I just spammed maybe on the test. So this is my result from the Oxford capacity analysis. It looks quite official. And as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different points that it says that it's attention urgent. And only 1 that is attention desirable. And then I have 2 that are acceptable under perfect conditions, whatever that means. Also, very fascinating that they've already set up an appointment for me. So October 7th at 2025 at 9 a.m. Wow. And they, confirm my appointment. It's not even that I had to opt in or ask for an appointment. The messaging is that it's already been set and all I have to do is click a button. And so this is another example of this momentum that I think is so common within really all religious groups and really almost any even non-religious group that's trying to get you on board, is that they make it so that the momentum really carries you forward and they're trying to limit the off-ramps as much as possible so that you stay engaged and you stay on the hook as their little fish. I also just think that the faux scientific intellectual aspect of this personality test is very interesting, considering I said maybe for every single one. You'd think they'd put a trigger on there that says like, you didn't actually take the test, go back and try again. But it says the Oxford capacity analysis is a factual scientific analysis taken from your answers. It is your opinion of you. So obviously I meant to read that and be like, wow, so many things are attention urgent. I must be really failing in life. That must be why I recently went through a hard time or have a bad relationship with my family member. It's because this is showing me me and confirming that the things I already know are going wrong in my life in my head, the personality test found it too. And so it goes on to say, it is the low points that are the cause of your troubles, and these can be changed with, drumroll please, Scientology. Also, knowledge is necessary to make full use of the best points of your personality, and that too can be gained through Scientology. Let's jump back in to see how Stan did with his test.
Okay, Stan, well, that's it. That's the end of the personality test.
So how'd I do?
Yeah, I'm afraid that you are completely miserable and totally depressed.
I am? I didn't know that.
Well, there's certainly no question that you are a perfect candidate for Scientology.
And so just like me, Stan discovers that he has many things that are attention urgent, and wouldn't you know it, the only way to solve this problem is by learning how to fix yourself through Scientology. I truly do think there's so much harm that comes from other people telling you how worthy you are, or if you're broken, or if you are depressed, especially when you see them as an authority figure. So for example, this personality test says, take the most accurate and reliable personality test. And so if this is, in my mind, if I'm duped into believing that this is literally the most accurate personality test in the world, then suddenly I have a lot of things in my life that are out of line, and I am put in the position of seeking help that I didn't even know I needed. This is really a pretty common dynamic, I think, in all religion, when you have a religious leader who can grant forgiveness, or you have to confess to them, or you have to, well, like for me, when I met with my bishop, for example, if he said I was good, it was like I had a totally clear conscience, whether I deserved to or not. And if he said I was living in sin or I needed to repent for something, I felt completely morally bankrupt, even though I was still just a teenager and I like skipped school or something. And so when an authority figure that you, for whatever reason, have learned to grow and to trust, looks you in the eye and is like, you're depressed. Or for Temple recommends, for when you're Mormon, they literally call it a worthiness interview, which is very charged language. If you don't pass the worthiness interview, the only interpretation is that you're not worthy to go into the temple, into God's house, and into his presence metaphorically. And so these types of announcements of you're depressed, you're not worthy, I think are really, really damaging to the human psyche, because you've perceived that that person has more knowledge and more authority to declare that about you than you have to declare that about yourself. So now we get to find out what Stan will need to do in order to right the ship of his depressed little boat.
What do I do?
It's very simple. We just need $240.
Wow. And so we see the irony on full display that after telling his friends that he can't spend $8 to go play laser tag, he gets the bill for $240 in order to fix himself. This, of course, is juxtaposed to the fact that the personality test was totally free, and they heavily advertised the word free all over the place as a way to get him in the door. Had they said, hey, the personality test is $240, well, then the brakes probably would have been put on more quickly, but now they've got him on the hook. To me, this also feels very reminiscent of Mormonism. One of the most common things we would say as missionaries about the Book of Mormon is that it would be totally free. And a lot of the branding, which I'll put off to the side here of the websites, is that it's free. One of the strangest places to see Mormon missionaries in the wild is putting the Book of Mormon for free on Facebook Marketplace. Get a free book about Jesus. Here's an example of some missionaries who are sharing the idea that you could get a Book of Mormon from them for free.
We are missionaries for Jesus Christ, and we teach about God's love and about this book.
Each page of this book testifies about his son, Jesus Christ, and what he did for us. And we promise that as you learn more about this book, you will find God more in your life.
Click the link below to get a free copy.
So there's the free copy mention in this video, which is another missionary video. She basically is like, look at all of the copies behind us. There's no shortage, so don't worry about being, having some imposition here, because we definitely have enough copies and they're definitely free. free. The church also does stuff like this with come pray with us, or other forms of free outreach. And so I think pitching the Book of Mormon and being able to get a free book about Jesus, the word free is just an interesting way into people's minds and hearts, because, you know, especially on the back end, just like we see the dollar number mentioned, we can fix all your problems. You just have to give us a nominal fee. Same with baptism in the Mormon church. You have to agree to live the law of tithing, which is 10% of your income. And so it's just so interesting to see that they get in the door with the word free, and then in the back end, they're going to say, oh, but you do actually have to pay us in order to get baptized or to get a temple recommend. You have to give tithing if you want to be able to continue going through this program. Now we see Stan go back to have dinner with his family and think about the fact that he's depressed and he didn't even realize it.
Stanley, you haven't touched your food. What's the matter with you?
I'm totally depressed.
What? Why?
I don't know. I need $240.
$240? What'd you do, break something?
This is where he's going to try to figure out how to get the money for the next step to cure himself of his depression. We find out he ends up using his bike money that he had previously been saving. And I think another great thing that they elevate in this episode is just this idea of introducing to someone that they're living a bad life or a depressed life or an unhappy life when they literally had no awareness that that was the case. So on my mission, for example, we used to have to tell people that they were living in sin because you cannot cohabitate. That's adultery. There were some cases where I knew other missionaries who they would orchestrate literally an entire wedding. So the two people would get married, they'd pay the fees to the magistrate or whatever, and the people would get married in order to get baptized. Or same with teaching people that their families won't be together forever in the afterlife, and saying, hey, because you weren't sealed in the temple, then you're in the afterlife, you won't be with your family forever. When a lot of people are just like, oh, I assumed I would be because God's a loving God. Or even in the case of coffee, trying to convince people that drinking coffee is a sin is quite a hard sell, and certainly not what you start with at the door. You're not like, did you know coffee is a sin? But I do think that this element of having to explain to people, hey, you're living in sin, so you need me, is so backwards to me, because it's like people will be just walking around in their happy lives, and then suddenly there's someone is being like, you won't be with your family forever, or like, you're depressed unless you give us money so we can continue auditing or whatever. And what I think it is that it's creating the problem and selling the cure. And in that way, they are able to basically convince people that they need something in their life desperately that a day before they were completely unaware of.
Michelle, our friend Stan wants to have auditing.
Great. So do you have the $240? Perfect. We're on our way. Come on over here and I'll fill you in on how the Church of Scientology works.
Before she jumps in here, I think it's interesting that they have the photo, the little illustrated photo of L. Ron Hubbard. This also reminds me of the prevalence of Joseph Smith and this kind of never ceasing acknowledgement of the founder in a way that feels a little bit like, oh, he's prominently displayed. The Mormon church also does this with current prophets. It also reminds me of Severance. I couldn't decide if I wanted to do like an ExMormon reacts to Severance. I did put a video about it on Patreon because there were truly so many overlaps between Severance and Mormonism, and then now as I'm watching the South Park episode between Severance and Scientology, maybe it's just the secrecy element or this never-ending reference back to the founder that feels very reminiscent of these religions. In Severance, we have Kier, and they'll say things like, you have the spirit of Kier in you, and there's always different iterations of Kier in these different folkloric stories, like him standing at the mountain, or him getting surgery, or being sick as a boy, or him in the fields. And I mean, I think there's even overlap into any organization that has as propaganda around a certain founder, displaying them as being very muscular or very attractive and very commanding in their presence, really no matter what they looked like in real life. I'm definitely getting a through line between all three of those within how L. Ron Hubbard is being presented here.
Scientology was founded by a great man named L. Ron Hubbard. Mr. Hubbard discovered that negative emotions are actually caused by things called body thetans. Mr. Hubbard invented a way to get rid of those bad thetans. This is called an e-meter. It's the main tool of Scientology.
So I think I've seen references to the e-meter, and this also, not to bring up Severance again, but reminds me of the break room in Severance, how they have to say the script over and over again and then see if they really mean it or not. And it's just one more level of this pseudoscientific approach to spirituality or psychology. You can actually buy previously owned e-meters on eBay. I was very tempted, but they seem to hold their value well enough that I was like, I'm not spending $300 on an antique e-meter, but maybe I'll put it on my Christmas wish list one day. I did think also it was interesting to look through some of these antique e-meters because they have some interesting little placards that come with them that talk about how it's like a copyright of L. Ron Hubbard. And if you zoom in and look at the particular dials, it's just like the rest of this religion, like incredibly vague. And I think the vagary is on purpose because it's basically like only those who know or who understand can access it. And for noobs like me, it's not like I could sit down at this e-meter and be able to tell if you're good or bad. But apparently whoever's the Scientologist running the e-meter who's been trained can understand whether you have depression or not. This kind of adds to this level to which it's insiders only. You have to kind of pay to get this information. If you want to have a reading for yourself, you have to have a specialist. And these are also, even just using the word therapy is basically weaponizing people's approach to healthcare, honestly. Like, oh, it's like a different approach to therapy. It adds this other layer of making it feel like it's legitimate and making it feel like it's above board and peer reviewed, even though only Scientologists are the ones using these machines to see inside of your soul. In addition, this invention of new language like body thetans is very pseudoscientific. They talk about in this episode that L. Ron Hubbard was previously a science fiction writer, and a lot of this does feel very science fiction-y. There are some more folkloric beliefs within Mormonism that are in the scriptures, like Kolob. There's still the hymn, if you could hide to Kolob in the blink of an eye, and then continue onward with that same speed to fly, and how God is existing somewhere in the universe, which I guess like God has to exist somewhere. But I can see the overlaps also, like in this film from the 60s or 70s, they show them walking in space and coming out of what looks like a portal, and it all is very science fiction-y. And I think if you buy into it, it can feel like, wow, we have like an insider scoop on the real science and the real universe. But from an outsider perspective, it can feel a little bit like invented out of whole cloth. This episode and looking at the antiques, the e-meters, is making me curious though to get an audit, because I'm just like, I just want to see what they would say. And I think that to some extent the curiosity does work a little bit because, and maybe I'm just I am just simply a curious person. And so whenever I'm dipped into a different world that I've never experienced, I want to get an audit. I want to sit in an intense room and be like answering really deep questions, not because I think I'm going to buy into it that it's true, but simply some of these types of experiences, similarly to how I like to get my palm read whenever there's an occasion, or go step into a church, a Catholic church on Christmas Eve. Like, I just have a very honest curiosity about a lot of this stuff because I just like to see how other people live and what they're taking seriously. So anyways, maybe it's working is what I'm saying.
Come on in the auditing room and I'll show you how it works. All these people are just like you, Stan, auditing with e-meters to get rid of their negative emotions. All right, Stan, I want you to just relax and take hold of the e-meter handles.
So this is gonna make me happy?
And I love his question too, like, so is this the thing that will make me happy? And she still doesn't even answer. And it's kind of a callback to the big banner they had in the, behind the missionaries whenever they had the table. Was like, are you happy? And like I said, I'm very curious and I enjoy watching stuff like this, but I'm also just like, oh, the whole world is manipulating vulnerable people to get them to try to simply be happy. I mean, South Park always makes me laugh, but sometimes if the darkness can feel like it's taking over.
Huh, that's strange.
What?
Something's wrong. Brian, could you come over here a second?
Yeah. Oh, hey there, Greg.
Stan.
Will you look at his thetan levels?
All right, so here's where we learn that his readings are off the chart. We fast forward to the president, and they're bringing these results to the president, and because it's such a big deal, and this is what the president says. I also, just as a side note, love that it's the L. Ron Hubbard Scientology Celebrity Center. Actually, when I first watched this, I watched this episode for the first time yesterday. I was like, haha, they're making a joke about how they often use celebrities to make Scientology look more legitimate and more alluring. I mean, it feels like almost like if you were an actress in California and you weren't in Scientology, are you even gonna go anywhere? They've very successfully infiltrated, which I read, they only have about 30,000 members. That was one number I found. But based on how pervasive it is, I would have guessed much larger. But anyways, the Church of Scientology Celebrity Center International is a real thing. They changed the name a little bit in the cartoon, but a celebrity center is actually what it's called. If we go to read some of the one-star reviews, which I always enjoy doing about churches, it says, I really don't like this church and its fake seminars. They attract artists under the name of acting seminars, but the seminar has nothing to do with film or acting. Then their staff approach participants one by one, isolate them, and ask for money. Red flag. It's truly a scam. And that's another thing I saw highlighted fairly often about Scientology is their use of these one-room situations, which we've seen in the episode too, because they take Stan into the personality room, they take him into an auditing room. Obviously, when you're in a one-on-one, basically sales pitch, it's a high-pressure environment where you feel more likely to say yes and more pressured. And so, yeah, the isolation being raised in the review here feels very true to what I've read. Oh, and we have a response from the owner. We respectfully note that your review appears to be from an account that, according to our records, has never visited our church. As such, we have identified and reported it as fraudulent, which is quite interesting because the review is someone from simply named Tiara. Like, do they really have, like, how could they know, you know? I'll read one more review. Don't borrow credit card money to donate to the church. People are doing that. That's so crazy that people are doing that. Hate when they ask for donation for new building, books and events, etc. I mean, the idea that this person is giving a 1-star review likely because they literally borrowed money off their credit card, which is a really bad financial decision, especially if it's simply to donate to the Church of Scientology. I'm not saying you should never do that. This is not financial advice. Mostly just that if you're trying so hard to donate to a church that you're borrowing cash off your credit card, that is a really scary financial choice. And of course, I mean, overall it has a 4.2, so I'm sure there's lots of members who are also, I mean, I love reading Google reviews for the Mormon church anytime there's a temple or a stake center or a congregation like a ward building. It's just interesting to read the reviews because usually you maybe have a few people coming on to be like, don't give them 10% of your money. So now we see the president reading the results from the e-meter.
The boy is from a small mountain town in Colorado, sir.
Sir, how can it be that a first-timer scores that kind of thetan level? He registered OT9. I'm only OT7 and I've been in the church all my life.
I've waited 42 years for this day.
So I think it's interesting how they set up this room. This is like we've seen multiple volcanoes. And the first time I saw the volcano art in the first time they showed it, I was like, what's the volcano thing? Because it feels very specific. I won't give it away because they explain it in the episode, or they allude to it. But I do think it's funny how they basically put a little Easter egg of the volcano in here constantly, and we're about to find out why volcanoes are so important to Scientology. There's also a volcano on the cover of the Dianetics book, and I never really understood why, so this South Park episode also enlightened me on that subject. Another thing to highlight is this globe they have. So the Mormon church headquarters literally has the same globe across the front, as you can see in this picture. To me, it's like giving a world domination message, which is that we will spread our gospel or our belief across the globe. This is a global church, not just an American church, not just a Utah church, not just a celebrity church. It's a global organization. And I think anytime anyone's putting a huge globe on the side of their building or in their conference room or whatever, I think it gives a very specific type of message.
Don't you all see what this means? There was only one person who ever registered OT9 in the history of our church. L. Ron Hubbard said he had lived past lives, that when he died his thetan would show itself again. Our prophet has returned. I will say Mormons do not believe in reincarnation. Scientology does seem to basically believe in reincarnation, though they don't use that word specifically. It's more that the thetan, they check the thetan levels. The thetan is referring to the soul, and the thetan can live multiple lives. So it's basically like reincarnation with using different terms. And while Mormonism doesn't have reincarnation, it does remind me of a story about the succession from Joseph Smith to Brigham Young. After Joseph Smith died, he died quite young, and there were a lot of people who said things like, Joseph Smith said I was going to be the next prophet or this or that, but there wasn't consensus. So the way that Brigham Young ended up getting the largest portion of the believers after Joseph Smith died was that he basically stood up, and while he was testifying, certain people said that they saw the countenance of Joseph Smith in Brigham Young, and that was a sign or a revelation that Brigham Young was meant to be the next prophet. And famously also, when Warren Jeffs took over from his dad, Rulon Jeffs, the same thing happened. So Rulon said he was going to live forever. Rulon Jeffs was the prophet of the FLDS church through about the early 2000s, and Rulon Jeffs prophesied that he would not die. And then so when he did, it was like, and so Warren Jeffs stood up and basically was like, I am Rulon. And certain people from the congregation were like, I see his countenance, or I see Rulon Jeffs portrayed or envisaged within Warren Jeffs' face. And then that's how he was able to grab the succession power and become the next prophet. Even this element of the show where they're like, it is L. Ron Hubbard's thetan, come back again. To me, that's why studying religion is so interesting, because it just plays so much on human psychology. And I don't think the reason these things repeat is because they're objectively true, but because human psychology is always going to have specific weaknesses to certain types of storytelling or certain power dynamics. So it's just interesting to see the parallels. I think that's why I've had people who say they're ex-Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Muslims or ex-Seventh-day Adventists watch my videos, because even though they're not, they weren't raised to believe in Joseph Smith as a prophet or the Book of Mormon as scripture, there's so much overlap to the lived experience of being in high demand religions that I think you can still glean a lot of information from just learning a little bit about Scientology. Let's jump back into the show. We'll see the fallout of the president of Scientology declaring that Stan is actually L. Ron Hubbard reincarnated. There he is! Thank you for returning. It's wonderful.
is wonderful.
We've got candles, we've got crying. Also just the second coming is here signs. Feels very cross-compatible with a lot of religions, that this is, it seems like every religion, or not every religion, but a lot of religions have this element of the second coming, or the rapture. Everybody just was saying the rapture was going to happen. There's always this something's about to happen soon and you better be prepared for it.
Hello, young man. I'm the head of Scientology. It is a great honor to meet you. All right, what the hell is going on here? He is the reincarnation of our church's most sacred prophet.
What?
And so we see the Scientology people have decided to go all in on Stan. In addition to the head of Scientology show up, like I said, I watched this for the first time yesterday, but I was like, are we going to get a Travolta appearance? Are we going to get a Cruise appearance? So the head of Scientology is not the only one to show up at Stan's house.
Oh my God, it's John Travolta!
Is this where he lives? Is this where L. Ron Hubbard is? Oh my God!
Yes, John Travolta and Tom Cruise are big Scientologists. Do you believe me now?
Yeah, so I already referenced this a little bit. I love they're like, do you believe me now? It reminds me of if you Google just meet missionaries, then it populates with an ad from the Mormon Church. And when you scroll down, it says, did you know over 847,000 people meet with missionaries each month? And then there's another, did you know 308,000 people joined our church last year? And this is a very interesting way of appealing to human psychology, similar to the personal testimonial. Whenever I did the quiz, it was like, this personality quiz changed my life. And that's another thing that human psychology is very susceptible to. We're very susceptible to person-to-person testimonial, even if it's not particularly backed by science. I think logically, a lot of people could probably say that celebrities aren't right about a lot of things. They're also just people. But it's very compelling to be like, well, this person that I've seen in movies and is so macho and cool is part of this thing, so maybe I should be a part of it too. And even just the appeal of numbers, can hundreds of thousands of people be wrong about something? Of course not. And so it feels very compelling because the larger the number or the more famous the celebrity, it just scratches this itch in the human brain that makes it feel like, oh, it must be right then. It must be objectively true, even though it's kind of an illogical path to go down. I think a lot of religion, this is really just what faith is believing something is true without seeing evidence. And I obviously am an atheist. I do not believe in God, but I feel like there's this strange logical jump from because something helps me, it means it's objectively true. So I feel like, obviously, I cannot refute the fact that people say prayer helps them. Prayer once helped me when I used to pray. But that doesn't mean that God literally exists. It simply means that praying helps. And I think that because of the way dogma and theology and doctrine work, it teaches us to draw these lines between things that really don't make sense. Because I find my car keys doesn't mean that Jesus literally died on the cross as a way of sacrificing himself for my sins. It simply means that my keys are existing in the physical realm, and there's only so many places I could have put them since I also exist in the physical realm. And so when I find my keys, it's because statistically that was a pretty likely thing to have happened. It doesn't mean that God literally exists, but I think that our minds are very attuned to drawing these conclusions when we're raised in a religious setting. We also at this point have this alternate storyline where Tom Cruise goes in the closet and won't come out of the closet. Basically, Stan says he doesn't like his acting as much as he likes Leonardo DiCaprio. And so I'm not going to react to those clips because that was its own little, basically, Tom Cruise criticism or jab apart from Scientology. This episode aired a long time ago, but I guess around this time, a lot of people were saying Tom Cruise was gay. that's kind of its own storyline tangent for me. So we're going to stick to Scientology. We're going to see what happens next when the leader of Scientology is trying to get Stan on board to embrace his identity as the resurrected being of L. Ron Hubbard.
Please understand, we just want what is best for your son. The reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard must be taken care of. He had many enemies. Wasn't L. Ron Hubbard a science fiction writer? Yes, but he was also a prophet who knew the secret truth about the nature of life.
I love that part too. I think in all of this, I mean, I feel like all religions have similarities, as I've been saying, but some of the biggest through lines for me are Joseph Smith and L. Ron Hubbard. I have several videos about Joseph Smith. This is the one that I would say I get the most into the mystical elements of his upbringing, but it is very similar. Like, he used to take a stone and say he could find treasure by looking through a hole in the stone. He called it a peep stone. He used to do scrying. I mean, his entire family was very into magic. And from what I understand back then in the 1800s, it was more common for people to mix basically folklore and mysticism with religion. It was more accepted, I guess, especially for people in the country or people living off in their own small town to mix religion and magic, even though now that's not really a thing that people are necessarily doing in mainstream Christian religions. All of this is just elevating this idea that amongst believers, you have a very, very specific understanding and faith in the founder. Obviously, Keir, like I already said, within the story of Severance, which is fictional, or L. Ron Hubbard, who he's like, wasn't he a fiction writer? Didn't he get in trouble? Didn't he have kind of a sordid past where he had lots of lawsuits? All of this is true, but for the believers in the faith, they have a really specific vision of who this person was, and it's usually a much more cheery and whitewashed version than what the historical account would suggest about these people. Here is where we see the founder of Scientology ask Stan's parents to leave the room so that he can tell him the true secrets of not just how Scientology came to be, but the true secrets of literally the world and the universe. Like, how did this all really happen?
You see, Stan, there is a reason for people feeling sad and depressed. An alien reason. It all began 75 million years ago. Back then, there was a galactic federation of planets, which was ruled over by the evil Lord Xenu.
I mean, obviously we're already getting some very strong science fiction elements. Even the name Xenu sounds like it belongs in Star Wars more than it does in a religion. Like I said, the Church of Scientology has a cross as their logo. Confusing branding. All churches should be required to meet with a brand manager who can help us all be more clear on what's going on over there.
Xenu thought his galaxy was overpopulated, and so he rounded up countless aliens from all different planets, and then had those aliens frozen.
And here we get the caption, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." I also love that they gave us a little of this bit of the story and then they just flash that caption up there. Yeah, from everything I can tell in my research, the thing is that this, like they prefaced before they started telling the story, to gain this information, apparently it's gonna be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the way Scientology mostly works, as told by ex-Scientologists or just from leaked materials that people have shared with places like WikiLeaks, basically they have this personality test, then you do the auditing. Once you are declared clear after your auditing process, then there's the next process. Basically they just have all of these levels, and for each level you're paying money. For the auditing, you're paying money to meet with someone, for them to declare you as clear. All of these things are happening to you before you ever learn any of this alien background. Apparently, you're getting deeper and deeper into the religion before you find out some of this other stuff that if they led with Xenu, just like if Mormon missionaries led with coffee, it'd be harder to get people on board. This also does ring true to me when it comes to Mormonism, because you obviously have talked about the temple ceremonies in the past where you are declared that you are going to become a queen or king in the afterlife unto God. These are long-standing religious ceremonies, but they're really not accessible to new members of the church. New members of the church may very well find the videos I've made about them or simply Google it, and it's actually not that hard to find. A lot of this stuff, whether it's Scientology or Mormonism or any religion's secrets, are fairly easy to find online with just a little bit of digging. But if you are following the program, then you're probably not going to Google it because you are trusting the authority figure that's sharing this information with you. You're trusting the missionaries, you're trusting the person who's auditing you. And so for Mormons, even after you get baptized, you're still not permitted to do the endowment ceremony with the green apron and everything. You have to wait at least a calendar year before you're going to be able to get that special temple recommend that will allow you to participate in that specific ceremony. And so I do think these elements of essentially making people jump through hoops in order to get more information. Obviously, in that year before you could do the endowment ceremony, you would have been paying 10% of your income that entire time, because getting baptized and getting a temple recommend, you basically have to promise that you are living the law of tithing and giving your 10% of your income. And in order to get here to learning this level of the Scientology, you're continuously paying large sums of money in order to level up within the religion. And so it's basically like a pay-to-play salvation, which is why I think religions get so frustrated when their secrets are laughed at and depicted on South Park, because it means that kind of the gig is up a little bit and it removes a lot of the secrecy that had once existed there.
Frozen alien bodies were loaded onto Xenu's galactic cruisers, which looked like DC-8s, except with rocket engines. The cruisers then took the frozen alien bodies to our planet, Earth, and dumped them into the volcanoes of Hawaii.
So I know I mentioned the volcano, so this is where we get the final reveal on why a volcano is an important symbol of a religion. And yeah, apparently, according to this story, the galactic tyrant 75 million years ago used volcanoes as part of his plan to rid the alien souls from his own galaxy. So now we're gonna see the souls of the aliens arising from the volcano and understand finally how this connects back to human beings, which is why this all matters.
Xenu didn't want their souls to return, and so he built giant soul catchers in the sky. The souls were taken to a huge soul brainwashing facility, which Xenu had also built on Earth. There, the souls were forced to watch days of brainwashing material, which tricked them into believing a false reality. Xenu then released the alien souls, which roamed the Earth aimlessly in a fog of confusion.
The alien sperm souls are roaming the Earth, which, I mean, this is another interesting element of religion, which is that it usually tries to have an origin story. It tries to answer the question, where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? These are very common questions people have, and religion makes the attempt to answer this one specifically through alien sperm souls, and obviously to this like brainwashing element. It's kind of just like the most convoluted science fiction story that is only available in paperback that you've ever read. But here's the final kicker.
At the dawn of man, the souls finally found bodies which they could grab onto. They attached themselves to all mankind, which still to this day causes all our fears, our confusions, and our problems.
This is what Scientologists actually believe. You probably couldn't even get a Scientologist to talk about this kind of thing, but if you could, I'm sure that they would tell the story in maybe a less absolutely ridiculous kind of way. I also love that Stan just has this face of just like, are you kidding me? I feel like when he was explaining that backstory, it's hard not to just zone out or like disassociate, because it becomes so like, and then it's just like, it doesn't really make sense. But obviously, so the net of that story is that the alien spirits have now captured our souls, or they are not captured. They literally are our souls, or they've inhabited our bodies. And Scientology helps helps clear the bad energy from the alien souls which are residing in our corporeal beings. I figured this would be a good moment to briefly step into a little bit more about Scientology before I finish reacting to the entire episode. I did think it was hilarious that on Wikipedia it says, quote, "It is variously defined as a scam, a business, a cult, or a religion." David Miscavige is the current leader of Scientology. He's really the only he's the second leader after L. Ron Hubbard. So this is a pretty new religion. For comparison, the Mormon Church is on their 18th prophet. So Russell M. Nelson recently passed away just a week ago. He was the 17th prophet of the Mormon Church, and Dallin H. Oaks is likely to be declared the 18th prophet of the church. So Mormonism does go further back than Scientology. I was surprised to hear that they're only on technically their second leader. Just like with all religions, the financial accounting is pretty wishy-washy, especially in the US. This is one of the problems people have with the Mormon Church, is that they're not very open and honest about their finances. It's basically a black box. The IRS even has certain exceptions for churches to not have to report things, which is wild. Welcome to America. But even though it's unclear the exact number of how much money Scientology has, many people have put it in the billions of dollars. So they definitely have a lot of money. The structure of Scientology is pretty interesting, which they've already alluded to in the South Park episode, which is basically that you meet with an auditor, they have to deem you free of something called engrams. Your thetan levels are deemed free of engrams. It sounds so made up, but that's what they're doing. And then once you're free of the engrams, you're given the status of clear. There's a book called Going Clear by a man named Lawrence Wright. This was the book that I saw appear the most in my research. I did order it, but it didn't arrive in time for me to make this video. It was published in 2013. This is probably the most referenced book about Scientology I've seen that in my research. And so I definitely suggest checking out Going Clear if you want to read more about this person's experience and just about the structure and the belief system of Scientology in general. And from what it sounds like, by the time you're announced that you've gone clear, you've already spent a lot of your money having all of these different sessions. Once you're pronounced clear, then you're welcome to take part in the next level of Scientology, which is called operating thetan levels. This has its own set of documents, and according to Wikipedia, at least, to reach the level that you get access to these texts or parts of these texts, you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is absolutely insane. Maybe I'll take the Mormon Church's approach of just a flat rate of 10% of your income rather than hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, maybe that's why people are literally taking out credit card loans in order to participate in the church, because they're not setting it on a scale of like, how much do you make? That's how much you can give me. It's just like, this is the cost. You can figure out how to pay it. Like I said, the internet really squashes a lot of religion's attempts for secrecy, and so you can find the operating thetan levels documents on WikiLeaks. I'll link them below. I tried to read through them, but it's truly so inaccessible to someone like me. I'm not a Scientologist, never was, and it's so continuously filled with so much Scientology jargon that it's almost like I almost don't know why they care that the documents are out there. I guess maybe just they care for other Scientologists, but it's so inaccessible. I can't even read it and really understand what they're talking about. It just sounds like a made-up language to me. I know I've been touching on it a little bit, but I feel like this, obviously they put the thing up that's like, this is what Scientologists actually believe, that Xenu brought billions of aliens to the earth and killed them, and then their souls inhabited our bodies. And honestly, as an atheist, I feel like there's this certain level of looking at other religions and saying they're ridiculous, or weird, or strange, or different. I don't think most people that I would walk past on the sidewalk would agree with this Xenu story. But I feel like so much of humanity is very strange. You know, if I told you that there's this ritual that some humans do where twice a day right before bed and right after waking up. They grab a special stick and they find a very specific paste, and they carefully measure how much paste to put on the stick, and then they put that stick in their mouths, brushing your teeth. Obviously, it's like, depending on how you are expressing things, anything can sound a little strange or a little odd. And I think the same goes for Christianity. If you look at the origin story of Jesus, we have a virgin that somehow gets pregnant, but she never had sex. We have a God is, on the cross, and even though he's all powerful, he still has to sacrifice himself for the sins of mankind, even though one might think that if God is all powerful, he could just erase the sins, but instead he has to be crucified by humans on a cross. Then, of course, we have him being resurrected 3 days later. Why not 7? Why not 2? Unexplained. It was 3 days, though. He comes back from the dead. According to Mormon lore, he goes to America, which honestly, as much as it does sound funny to be like, oh, he got up into the clouds and took a hard right to go to the Americas, the story of a baby being born to a virgin is also strange. It's fanciful. It's only normal to you because we've seen depictions of Mary riding a donkey for Christmas since we were kids. So something's strangeness is often quantified just by its familiarity, not by its objective truth or by its worth as an idea in particular. It's just how familiar it is to us. This truly does, in my opinion, go for all religions. Mormons don't drink coffee, which many people poke fun at, including myself. Jehovah's Witnesses don't get blood transfusions. Jews often place a small scroll at their door, and they believe that's important for their religion. Muslims believe that eating pork is against God's will, even though Americans eat millions of pounds of pork a year. All of these things are not to call out any religion in particular, but just to say that what's strange or odd to us is the norm for other people. And even the fact that Americans spend hours of every single day staring into a small glass box and doing this with their fingers, TikTok, whatever, sounds pretty normal. But then if you are removed from the situation or even just simply describe it in a way that sounds atypical, the nature of what you're criticizing sounds quite different. And really not even just that religion can be strange or odd if it's unfamiliar, just simply the way humans act can be odd or strange. Like theme parks, I feel like they defy reason. Why would you want to go on a roller coaster and get whipped around and go upside down? Why would you willingly go into a haunted house? It really doesn't make sense that we want to be afraid, but human nature isn't really necessarily that logical. And so for me, I wouldn't say that it's the strangeness of any of these things that I take issue with. It's not the strangeness of the temple or the Book of Mormon, or even the strangeness of Xenu that I'm taking issue with. It's just that these dogmas and these theologies are often used to exert power over people. It's when religion is used to control people that I take an issue with the cost of what religion does to people. And often that cost is disproportionately carried by women and minorities and people who are not fitting the mold of what the religion is expecting them to be. For me, it's when religion is used to, for example, tell women that their only role in life should be to be a wife and a mother, and that's their divine purpose appointed to them from God, and wanting other things is outside of the realm of what God wants for them. For me, it's when religion is used to dehumanize other people by calling them demons, by saying they don't deserve to go to heaven. Then that's where religion goes from being this thing where if someone says, I like to pray, it makes me happy, even if you're praying to Xenu or the flying spaghetti monster, if that makes you happy, far be it from me to step in your way of doing that. But as soon as it's Xenu wants you to give me a bunch of your money, in order for you to be happy, then the idea of Xenu or whatever is being used to control people and to coerce them into acting in ways that aren't favorable for them. And this really extends in a lot of directions. You know, the control might manifest by the religion saying, give us your money in order to be saved, or come to church and clean the building and go through all of these hoops. And only once you do all the things we say, then you can be with your family forever in heaven. The control, whether it's for a woman being modest or whatever, like the control takes many different forms, which is kind of the point of my whole channel, is talking about all the many ways my religion that I grew up with was used to control me, or had doctrines that were controlling or exerted power in ways that were immoral. And so it's really not, like I said, the strangeness that I take issue with. It's when religion is used to control people. And we haven't even gotten into the Sea Org and the purported child labor and human trafficking. This video is, and really even the South Park episode, is really just scratching the surface of how many times people have raised the flag to say, hey, this religion or this cult parading as a religion or this business structure is damaging the people who are a part of it. And ex-Scientologists have put a lot of effort into talking about the realities of Scientology's beliefs and their effect on the members who are trapped in that belief cycle. One of the most famous is Leah Remini. She has some documentaries. I'll link her stuff below too. I also know that a podcast called Last Podcast on the Left did a deep dive into Scientology. So I'll link some of these, like the book I mentioned, Going Clear. There's a ton of really interesting resources out there, and I'm looking forward to diving deeper in, because I do feel like this Scientology episode made me, I'm like, is this how people feel about Mormonism after watching one of my videos? Because I feel like I'm about to do for Scientology what people probably do on this channel, which is like binge and learn all the information. Let's jump back into the episode. This is where Stan has fully embraced his LHR identity, and his friends are gonna come chat with him about it.
We're gonna go to the movies. I can't. I'm writing a new sacred doctrine for my church. Look, Stan, we're really getting concerned about this cult you're getting into. Cult? Scientology isn't a cult, Kyle. Dude, L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. He lived on a boat with only young boys and got busted by the feds numerous times. I did not.
I love how he says, I did not, because he's now fully bought into his new identity. I think it raises in my mind the question that a lot of ex-Mormons ask, which is if the prophets really believe they're prophets, or if they are in on it. I at least think for Joseph Smith, I think that it was a cycle where he did believe he was a prophet, which was then reinforced by other people believing he was a prophet. And then the momentum of people believing in him made him more charismatic. So if you believe me, I believe me, basically was, I think, how it worked. And I remember reading the story about Joseph Smith, where at this early meeting of the church, right when he had first started organizing the church, there was a family who brought their baby or their child who had passed away. And rather than burying the child, they had kept the body and brought the body to Joseph Smith for him to resurrect the child. Because obviously Joseph Smith is saying he's a prophet, and resurrection is something that happens in the Bible. And so they are thinking that Joseph Smith can perform a miracle and resurrect their child. And in the story, he does actually attempt. Joseph Smith does actually attempt to resurrect the child, which to me, if anything, shows me he does believe. It's that he's gonna actually see if it works, rather than just saying something like, oh, the Lord has told me this is against his will, which is another easy out. But rather than taking an easy out, he's like, okay, I'll try to resurrect the baby. And the story even says he felt too like ashamed to be like, I can't do it. And then obviously the child does not get resurrected, and apparently a lot of the people who were at that meeting and ultimately ended up leaving the church because it kind of damaged their view of him as a prophet, because he wasn't able to perform the miracle. The reason I tell that story is just to illustrate that I do think that often prophets, especially as they gain more followers, end up basically drinking their own medicine and thinking, oh, if they believe, then I must be real. I just love how he's like, I didn't do those things, because he's now fully bought into the mythos of himself as LHR.
I did not. Those are rumors put out by people who are afraid because they don't know the secret truth. What secret truth? I can't tell you unless you pay for a few years of audit counseling.
I can't tell you the truth unless you pay for it. I also just think that line like, oh, those are lies put out by others is hilarious because there's a lot of overlap, like I said, between Joseph Smith and L. Ron Hubbard. This is an essay from the Mormon Church about Joseph Smith, and it says, others have accused Joseph of wrongdoing. Some of these allegations are slander or based on false information. Some result from an incomplete grasp of historical sources or reflect a misunderstanding of the culture in which Joseph lived. Others simply remind us that while Joseph was a remarkable prophet and a man of character, he was also human. And I mean, honestly, just change Joseph Smith out with L. Ron Hubbard and you have the same rationale. Which is that, well, you know, he was just a man and a lot of people didn't like him, so they made up a lot of lies about him to try to ruin his reputation. I think all of these are overlaps because the human brain works in the same way, whether you're substituting many different belief systems. And I really think that believers are, and really all humans, are just people who are operating logically in an illogical structure, in an illogical framework. Everybody is acting quite logically according to what they know of the world. Even if from an outsider's perspective, you could say, oh, that doesn't really look that logical. To the people who are operating within the structure that they've come to believe is the literal truth of the world and universe, it makes a lot of sense to them. If you truly believe in Scientology, what is $240 for finding happiness and being right with the world? What a small price to pay in order to feel like everything's good. And so I think believers are people, believers and humans, like I said. I'm not even saying I'm exempt from this. I think we are all working logically in illogical systems and just basically doing the best we can.
All I know is that I was depressed before and now I found meaning. I didn't know you were depressed. Neither did I. But now, if you guys can't accept this great thing I belong to, then I suppose we're no longer friends. Stan, I just want you to know that I still hate Kyle more than you.
And so we see that the process of isolation is complete. You know, so I'd love to meet I'm sure I never will, but I do think the South Park writers I think South Park is famous for a reason because they're very adept, like I said at the beginning, they're very adept at understanding pop culture, human psychology, mixing religion with the human condition, or really any time I watch something of them, it's always like a very interesting commentary. Even if I don't necessarily always agree with the commentary, it does feel like astute commentary, I guess, if that makes any sense. It reminds me of a few weeks ago, I read some essays I wrote as a BYU student, which is a Mormon university, and I basically wrote about how I cut off all of my non-member friends because I didn't feel like they were a good influence. This is middle school students that I'm referring to as black hole-like beings or black hole souls. And I think calling them black hole souls is similar to what Stan is doing here, which is like he's cutting out his friends who are trying to kind of like warn him, hey, you look like you might be involved in something that doesn't look so great. And he's like, well, that's a sign you don't understand, you're not a believer, so I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. And I think I definitely did that at times. If people didn't rise to my standards for them or my religion's standards for them, I felt like it was not right for me to continue to fraternize with them. Now we're going to see the leader of Scientology come back in to check on Stan / L. Ron Hubbard and see the new revelations that he has to share with the world.
Yes, of course. It's so wonderful.
And best of all, I wrote that all the Scientologists should no longer have to pay money to belong.
What?
I realized that to really be a church, we can't charge people for help.
What are you, stupid? How do we make money?
And now we see the final criticism that it was all about money all along.
Then how do we make money from those people?
Well, it's not about the money, it's about the message, right?
False. It was always about the money, which, as I said, it's unclear how much money Scientology actually has. They obviously also in this are like, oh, you can have that for a nominal fee. And I just think gatekeeping, you know, adding a paywall to salvation is dark. I don't think it's moral. I mean, if you can't qualify for a temple recommend without paying tithing, you can't, you know, that's, I'm sorry, I don't know how to explain that other than a paywall to heaven. If you can't go clear without paying for your auditing sessions, you know, if it's that important, shouldn't it be free? I don't know. I guess if I start a church, I'm gonna try to keep it free for you all. But I do think it also feels reminiscent because obviously the Mormon Church is one of the wealthiest churches. Some say the wealthiest church on earth, multi-billion-dollar corporation. Some estimates say 300 billion, some say 500 billion, some say 200 billion. We certainly know it's in the billions of dollars, more than Wells Fargo, more than Disney. I mean, on what planet does anybody need that? If Jesus is all powerful, if God is all powerful, why do they need billions of dollars for the second coming? Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that it's like the leader of Scientology has been on board this whole time, and then as soon as money gets mentioned, he's like, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Whoa, whoa.
Literally, wait a minute.
You don't actually believe this crap, do you? Brainwashed alien souls? E-meters and thetan levels? Those people out there buy that crap, and I thought you were smart enough to see what was really going on. What's better than telling people a stupid story and having them believe you? Having them pay you for it, stupid!
So obviously he gives him the whole spiel about this is all about money after all. Stan is on board and he's like, okay, I'll still be the leader. I'll be the reincarnation. And here we see him coming out of his house with a flower crown and a robe, like he's some sort of Roman god. And this is the speech we get to hear.
We're all looking for answers, you know? We all want to understand who we are and where we come from, but sometimes we want to know the answers so badly that we believe just about anything. I'm not the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard, and Scientology is just a big fat global scam.
Oh, we are gonna sue you!
Like I said, I reacted to the Trump episode from season 27. This South Park Scientology episode was from a long time ago. It was from the early 2000s, but they have the same criticism of Trump because he's like, I'm gonna sue you. So here we have the Scientology people, when they don't like the way things are going, then the clear answer is to sue them rather than solve it any other way.
Yeah, you think you can say our religion is a lie? We'll sue you, buddy!
You told me it was a lie!
Oh, now you're putting words in my mouth! You are so sued! Yeah, that's right! How dare you!
And so the episode ends with all of these, we're gonna sue you. And my final favorite piece of humor, which you might not have even picked up on if you turn off the TV too soon, is that when they're rolling the final credits, they just have John Smith and Jane Smith, a bunch of anonymity to protect all the people who worked on it from being sued, which is a great final joke, in my opinion. I was like, is something wrong with my eyes? And then I was like, oh, anonymity to protect the producers and creators from getting sued, which obviously is just a joke because everybody knows who makes South Park. Great as usual, South Park. I did like the episode. I did think it was pretty hilarious. I do love to just see their takes on religion because it's usually pretty sharply accurate. Like I said, I did react to the All About the Mormons episode. The South Park creators were not Mormon themselves, but they grew up around Mormons, which is how we also get the Book of Mormon musical. People have also asked me to react to the movie Orgasmo, which is also from the creators of South Park, but I will, it's rated NC-17, so I'm not going to react to that. Maybe on Patreon, but I'm not like, I don't know if I want to go down that path personally, but I do have a reaction to the All About the Mormons episode. I reacted to the recent Trump episode that people were all up in arms about. So if you want to see that reaction, it's already posted on Patreon. I'll link that one below along with everything else I've talked about in today's video. If you have a suggestion on what piece of internet or pop culture media, really any religion, I feel like it is enjoyable to compare and can do a bit of comparing and contrasting. So if you have something else you want me to react to, I always love when people suggest things because it puts in my mind what people are the most interested in and gives me some great ideas. So drop in the comments if you have something else, whether South Park or not, that you'd like for me to react to. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next week.